dollar index here. So dollar index has been quite consolidated this year, right? I mean, if we look from the beginning of 2023 and make this a little bit bigger, this like pink line here, just up, down, kind of keeping the same range. You know what I mean? These same highs and lows, really just consolidated tight range. Now, obviously, we are coming off of a year that looks like this. It's kind of relevant that we'd be consolidating at in and around, 50% of that range, and just building up some more open float liquidity, right? Some liquidity below here, liquidity above here. You got internal liquidity below here, internal liquidity above here. So lots of, I'd say, liquidity engineering. There's also fear in the markets due to, potential crash, potential war, a lot going on. So with that being said, I'm just gonna remove this for a minute here and really get into the higher time frame. So on a monthly chart, let's see, we're coming off of this monthly fair value gap right here, right? And as you can see, we've traded into it once, twice, 3 times, and we're just using it as, let's say, a quote-unquote support. Now, this black line is consequent encroachment of this gap, which means it is 50% of this gap, and it's likely to drive into that at some point. Now, it doesn't have to. If it's really strong, it doesn't have to. Due to this consolidation, I'm thinking that it's likely that we'll at some point reach into this consequent encroachment. So that's why I have it here. And we also have a bearish fair value gap up here, right? Now this bearish fair value gap, we've been creating liquidity below it, which personally leads me to believe that will probably drive higher, right? We haven't touched it yet. That's not a touch. If you zoom in, you can see that small white space there has not touched. So I'm waiting, and my bias is that we'll reach up into there, right? Looking at like a 2-week chart. We're in a 2-week bullish fair value gap. We've kind of failed that, so we might go lower, right? We're respecting this 2-week bearish fair value gap here and this bullish inversion fair value gap. You can see bodies are respecting it. That's good news. So we actually might see a bearish dollar here, which would be risk on scenario for assets and foreign currencies. This is just more of a longer term projection, but if we look on a weekly chart now, we could see, okay, we have this implied fair value gap here, and we're trading into it, right, bouncing around in it. And then in terms of consequent encroachment of that implied fair value gap, I'm going to rough it here, but we've also stayed above in terms of bodies, consequent encroachment of this implied fair value gap on the weekly chart. So I'm starting to see slight signatures, or to be honest with you, pretty high probability signatures that this is a low probability condition to trade in, right? The market's consolidating. It's been, very back and forth, so it's a tough market to call nonetheless. Now, here's where, for me, it gets interesting in terms of like short-term biases. See here, we have this drive down, and then we have a drive up here, right? Drive up into this weekly fair value gap, and I just have it listed here as a balanced price range. So, oh shit. Let me just grab that. Yes, we got the balanced price range here, and you take, your premium discount based off of this low and this high. you can see we've dropped down into a discount. Now, in terms of dropping into the discount, we had a lot of area in here that, we had that weekly implied fair value gap. It is weekly order block here as well. As you can see, it's closed below all these bodies, large wick. So this is the order block itself, the wick. We have this fair value gap on the daily chart, and we've traded into it, just touched it, just a quick little love tap, and then we've created an order block here. So in terms of trading this order block, right, this order block here, closing below this mean threshold is very bad if you're bullish. Now, it does not guarantee that this order block will fail, but it is higher probability that the order block will fail and will drive lower, either deeper into this fair value gap, or ultimately for these lows down here, right? We have some pretty clean lows, equal lows. Same could be said about the highs, but these lows are kind of open here, right? And any lower, I think, will have a low resistance liquidity run, kind of a nosedive into this monthly fair value gap, consequent encroachment. So how we trade, I guess, on Monday and Tuesday away from this will determine how we are going to be moving, right? Like if we're going to be respecting this order block, we got to be going up from here, right? Like this has to be a trade higher. Now we do have some relative equal highs here, especially. So yeah, I'm thinking we're in low probability conditions just because it is kind of easy to call it both ways. Like the same could be said about this weekly fair value gap here, this bearish fair value gap on the weekly chart. Let's say we mark that in red. Drop down into a daily, and you see how we're coming up into it. And yes, we have not been respecting it with the wicks, but the bodies have rejected cleanly. So if I were to pick a better reaction in terms of bearish reactions or bullish reactions off PD arrays, I'm saying that this is probably the best one, right? On a 4-hour chart, it kind of came up, consolidated once we've been in here, consolidated pretty tightly, and then once we ran this high here, kind of gave up the ghost and drove lower. So we've taken some sell side liquidity here, and we're in a fair value gap on the 4-hour chart. Now, I mean, you're talking about comparing strengths. I mean, the 4-hour is not as strong as the weekly, but this could cause a retracement into this liquidity void here, right? Like we have a really strong drop in price here, so I'm assuming that price is going to want to trade back up into here, potentially back up into a new premium, right? So above this, and if it does, then we'll see how it reacts there. But it is really a 50-50 call, so not the highest probabilities in terms of it's not the highest probabilities in terms of a really easy low resistance liquidity run or directional bias. What I think will be into play this week, this order block, really important, and I think that potentially this could be a breaker right here, so we'll have to see, because this could technically be a propulsion block, right? Now the propulsion block itself should really only be up to about here, right? About mean threshold of that body, and you can see we tap into it. Clean setup for 1, 2, 3, 4 days technically you've had of an extension higher. So we'll see. I think that I'm 50-50 on dollar right now, so I'm going to be moving a little bit more nimble in the markets. Euro dollar. So we just went over the dollar index, and dollar index is kind of slightly consolidated, right? It's I guess you could say it's a low probability condition in terms of choosing directional bias, but we can also see the same thing. It's pretty much across all majors in foreign currency. Consolidation, just, I mean, this is an inverse of the dollar index pretty much. So in my eyes, again, we traded up into this monthly fair value gap, and we've actually, if I zoom it in here, right, this is the gap here. You have the consequent encroachments. Consequent encroachment, we've traded up into the consequent encroachment twice. I personally believe that there was an imbalance here in terms of buy side imbalance, and there's an inefficiency in the sell side here, right? BISI. And we'll jump to the 12 month to examine why. So look here. You have, I'll just draw this out with the parallel. This yearly fair value gap, right? Drive down into it, reject cleanly off of it, right? So in my eyes, right, they were obviously really heavy on the shorts from here to drive into this yearly fair value gap to offer sell side, right? This was same thing that you see on this monthly fair value gap. When we go back to the monthly, same thing here, right? It's a BISI, a buy side imbalance, sell side inefficiency. There was not enough sell side offered here, and you see it's a balanced price range as well. So when they drove price into there and we really jumped off of that, I remember here I was trading at this point, and I remember seeing, like, you know, euro going below $1, right? Euro dollar going below 1, right? So this, I believe, needs to be revisited, and once we revisit that price, then we could potentially run these highs, right? Kind of have that open high look there. I'm just saying potentially, right? Like, I mean, we could go lower, but another reason, we'll go down into just a like weekly chart. Another reason is we still have some imbalance in here to be filled on a weekly, on a daily chart. Still have some imbalance, and there's an actual open daily fair value gap here, right? So we got some sell side liquidity above this bullish fair value gap. So I'm assuming that they could use this, right? They could kind of pair this with the sellers here and buy from these sell stops, buy from everybody who's selling in here, and take price higher. But in my eyes, this whole area, let me draw it. This whole area is going to be used for sell stops, right? They want people to sell here. So when we drive below here, when we drive below here, even when we drive below here, drive below here, this is an area where sellers will be entering the marketplace through, you know, the breakout traders who want price to go down, through anybody who was long here, 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 you know, they're gonna have stop losses there. So, and also just the whole dynamic of what the market could look like when you go down to this price, right? Like, whatever, say we come down, like, oh, we're in a bear market on euro, we're in a bear market, and then you start reversing up potentially, right? Because they're gonna need to absorb these sell stops, so they'll buy. Now, I'm not gonna remove the idea of this low here being taken as well, so we'll keep that in mind as well. But for now, I would say euro is like longer term bearish. In terms of shorter term, we'll go into that now. So on a weekly chart, see we've traded up into this fair value gap here. We were respecting it and we've closed above it now versus this bullish fair value gap here. Let me turn the magnet back on. Versus this bullish fair value gap here, we've driven into it, right? Kind of that 3 drives pattern, 1, 2, boom, up, and we could be reaching higher. Again, this is a nice reaction off of a weekly imbalance. So if we do go higher, then I think that our ultimate objective would be let me just switch this because it's not ideal, but I think our ultimate objective could be this red line up here in terms of this rejection block, or if we really want to get animated, back up into this monthly fair value gap. So that's on a weekly, right? We have this weekly bullish fair value gap. In terms of a daily chart, we got this daily order block here. Gave us a clean reaction. Now it could just be acting as a roadblock, or this could be a turning point and we're just running liquidity here. So in terms of this high has been taken, and you see on GU this high was left open, which is why GU has had a lot lower resistance liquidity run right up into this high on Friday, NFP, right? And you can see dollar index with that low, it's actually been taken, right? They souped this low. It's just the whole SMT thing, right? The weaker pair becomes a stronger pair. Now, when you get into the daily on euro, you could see this was our order block, and this could potentially be either a propulsion block or its own order block as well. So we're taking liquidity, determining like this, taking this high would probably let us run all the way up into here and maybe into not consequent encroachment, but mean threshold of this order block, which comes in at 110, right? So 110.27.8, and I want to see on the weekly chart 110, yeah, see 22, right? So it'd be pretty close to that rejection block if we do use this as a rejection block. So I'm thinking that if we do run this high, then we'll probably come up into mean threshold of this order block, this daily order block up here. Not financial advice, don't just take a short there. This is just an area where we want to see how price reacts to this. Okay, and what was interesting for me is why I have this marked up was when we traded into this weekly fair value gap here, we left an order block, right? A 4-hour order block, and you can see that we disrespected the order block, we souped it, we drove through mean threshold, but now we've came back up and with a really strong reaction. So in my eyes, when I saw this, I was anticipating that we would run for this sell side here and then maybe close above mean threshold, but we didn't. So that could mean that this was the order block, this is just the soup on the order block, right? Because you could see, I believe GU respected this low, yeah, right? So GU respected this low, dollar index did not, right? And you could see this, for the dollar index it'd be the high, but dollar index ran the high. So I'm anticipating we could, this is another one of those ones where like I'm iffy, right? Like we're in a consolidation. I can kind of call it both ways in terms of, I mean, this is a pretty obvious area I think that we'd probably hit, but do we want to run this high, or is GU just cleaning up quickly before wanting to continue down lower, right? Like I think longer term, I'm bearish euro, going down into this monthly fair value gap. But shorter term, it feels a little bit low probability to me. So I'm going to be watching this specific candle here as a potential order block, bullish order block right here. I may mark that green, right? Potential bullish order block, right? We've closed below liquidity. Could just be the soup here. So if we do retrace down into here, I'll be watching how we respect this specific green box here. And ultimately, if we do go higher, this would be my upside objective here. And if we go lower, then my first downside objective would be this low here. And after that, if we do continue through, you know, low resistance wise, probably run this low here, this low here. And if we get through this low, then my target would be getting to this low and continuing down lower, right? So I do believe that we're bearish, and we'll have to see how it respects here. If this is either a Judas swing for the month, right? Is this a monthly candle Judas swing? We'll just look quickly at the monthly chart. Is this going to be the fake move higher to go lower, or was this the Judas swing into the fair value gap to go higher? We'll have to see. I'm going to be very nimble this week personally in the markets, especially as there's not a ton of PD arrays that are really making it obvious right now. I think I'm conflicted with my higher time frame objective versus kind of like the shorter term objective, or bias rather, right? Like I believe we're going down here, but just in terms of institutional order flow right now, we could be reaching higher. So I'll trade accordingly and we'll see how it goes. GBP USD, pound dollar, or you can call it cable. So we got this monthly fair value gap up here in terms of fill last month, drove up into it, right? Near the end of the month. I'll just show you on a daily chart. Right, near the end of the month, or I guess middle of the month, came up into it. I was long through here, getting up into that monthly fair value gap, then we came off. So looks like we're running some liquidity here on pound, right? You can see we've ran the high menially with 1.2 pips, but I'm sorry if you hear the dogs barking, but so we've ran some buy side liquidity here, right? We had an open high where we did not run this high, and euro and dollar index did, so this was needed to be taken, right? The liquidity was supposed to be taken or something like that. So in my eyes, continuing higher doesn't seem too likely, if I'm being honest. Like, we have this daily fair value gap up here, which could be a potential fill. I'll just draw that out and we'll see. Have we traded into it? We have, right? Traded into it each time. We're using it, we're respecting it. So I'm thinking that that could potentially be the reason for price to drive lower, right? Top out. Like, this just looks like a bullish market. There's a lot of open flow liquidity in my eyes. There's a lot of open flow liquidity. Pound has been the leader though. Like, if you want to talk about trending wise, like, pound's had a decent year of movement. It's still really consolidated, still tight, but pound has been a little bit more responsive in terms of being bullish. So what we could do is look into the weekly chart, right? Because the monthly chart, I mean, this is what we have right now. I think that this order block is a potential draw on liquidity. You do have these lows here. 2 week wise, we have this fair value gap, this 2 week fair value gap, which is blending with this monthly order block. Why is it an order block? Use this low. Ran low, closed below the low, right? So most likely gonna drive up into there. It could probably touch the wick too. The wick's probably just enough, but I think that if we were to drive this low, we'll probably spend some time in this order block, you know, pairing orders. So let's look on a weekly. So weekly, we're coming off this bullish fair value gap here, and you see we repriced to it, and bodies are respecting it very cleanly. So in terms of institutional order flow, we're looking bullish. I'm just not trying to call a top here, but I do believe we could probably reverse here, but it doesn't have to. It does not have to. Let's check daily chart now. So we know that we're coming off of this weekly fair value gap here. We're in this monthly fair value gap, and you can see last month we're respecting it, right? Like we came up, driven up into it, did our work, closed below it. This month came up, and I mean, it's only the beginning of the month. We've had our first week pass, but if we can continue to close below this consequent encroachment, then I think that is a pretty good sign of bearishness. And it's just going to be, I guess, time will tell if we're going to be respecting it or we're not going to respect it. So in terms of the daily chart, what do we have here? Potential order block, right? If we do want to go higher, we could potentially see this order block act as support right here. Now, I need to actually mark out this weekly fair value gap. I'm going to remove this monthly fair value gap level for, actually, it's fine. I'll do this. Boom. Here. Take a look at the daily chart now, right? So you can see these two candles have aided in rebalancing this fair value gap, which means this can be an order block, both of them together. So drive it over here, and you can see mean threshold here lays below this low here. We have a potential implied gap here, implied fair value gap. Oh, I'm not drawing anything. Oops. Right there, so we could drive lower, trade into that, and go higher. I'm thinking this, if we're bullish, we're probably going to want to retrace, right? We might have maybe one more bullish day and create a fair value gap, but in my eyes, I assume that we're going to want to come back down into some fair value here, right? Retrace a bit. We've most likely induced buyers into the marketplace and taken buy stops out of the marketplace, right? So anyone who is short, buy stops have been taken. So come back down in, either get some more orders, load up on some more orders, or they'll probably just reverse it in general. But my eyes is I really favor coming down into this order block here, right? In terms of the pound. So we'll see how it reacts there. And on a 4-hour chart, you can see, let's look at the evidence here. So 4-hour chart, again, we've ran highs, we've closed above the highs. So getting below here is most likely going to make this a bearish order block. We got some liquidity down here. We got some more liquidity right here between these lows, right? So like liquidity, boom, boom, even more here, right? So to me, I just feel like that this run is probably done. Maybe they Judas it up a little bit for the weekly candle, but to me it looks pretty good to favor the downside. So again, I react to price, so depending on what I see, how price is moving, that's when I will take action myself. But this is just an estimate, a forecast, right? What's gonna happen? What do I see? What do I think is gonna happen, right? And my opinion is that we could probably retrace here and ultimately run liquidity in reverse. If it doesn't happen, that's fine. I'm not gonna get killed. So yeah, in terms of pound dollar, I do favor the downside. I think there's a lot of open flow liquidity, at least into here, potentially into here. We could check. So if we look at, like, let's say euro right now, you can see that euro ran these lows here and again here, while pound has continuously posted higher, 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 making this an easy buy market, right? This is a very low resistance market where price is just continuously trending higher until its ultimate buy side objective here. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I do favor lower prices. But if we are continuously respecting, bullish PD arrays like this fair value gap, like if we come lower, then there's going to be some potential respect of, like, let's say like this as a breaker, right? So we'll see. It's not guaranteed. And yeah, CAD. So in terms of USD CAD, we're looking at this and seeing a pretty large liquidity here, or liquidation rather. All right, like we got all this here, all this liquidity, right? We get ran through into last week, right? Let's see, boom, 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 driven, and last week we trade up into this fair value gap here, which was used to drive price lower into this liquidity. Now, looking at this, what do we have? Well, let's start to examine. So first of all, we had this bearish fair value gap here, used wonderfully as a catalyst for an on-farm payroll. Beautiful trade. We have that, reacted well off of it. We have this fair value gap here, also closing below it. So I'm a little interested in terms of, okay, are we going to be bearish now? Are we going to be bullish? Look at like a 2-week basis, monthly. We don't really have a lot in this price leg to look for in terms of bearish price objectives. In my eyes, I really like this. I really, really like this. I think that they could probably run up into these highs here. And is it unfortunate? Yes, I'm Canadian. That means our currency will devalue, but let's look at the daily chart here. The daily chart's going to paint a pretty nice picture. So we've ran our low here, right? And if we look on the dollar index, we've done the same, right? Actually, no, we have not done the same. Dollar index did not run that low. As you can see, this low here is this low here. So Canadian dollar, right? USD CAD, turtle soup that low. We got a fair value gap here, right? Respecting the fair value gap well. This is a potential bullish order block. Now, yes, we're coming off of this weekly fair value gap here. I think it could be used as a retracement level to go higher. This looks clean, really clean to me. This buy side liquidity up here looks clean. We're thinking in terms of the US dollar, right? I think that this could be clean here, or at least these highs up here. We'll take a look at the US dollar as well. So US dollar ran this high, USD CAD didn't, so I'm assuming we'll probably run up to these highs at some point. Right now, we have this daily fair value gap. We've closed below consequent encroachment, so it could mean we want to go lower. Maybe we want to return back into this bullish order block, or potentially use this as, let's say right from here, whatever, as a propulsion block right here. And if we do use that as a propulsion block, that would allow us to drive higher. Now, we'll see if Monday trades a little bit away from this higher and we're kind of flirting with this as a propulsion block, then we could see a drop into it on Tuesday, and then, you know, Tuesday low of the week type scenario. USD CAD looks pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. I like the USD CAD play. I think this low is potentially protected here. So that being said, yeah, you could potentially see a revisit up into this fair value gap here, right? And we'll just take a look again. Let's look at the dollar index and see. Oh shit, I was just moving that. But let's take a look at the dollar index. I think this is the same fair value gap here. No, it's not. It's this one here. Yes, dollar index didn't even have a fair value gap there. So I'm assuming we'll probably want to run up and, let's say, quote unquote, fill this liquidity void, drive higher. We got a balanced price range there as well, through this fair value gap and this fair value gap here. So I'm assuming we're going to want to reach back up into there and potentially run these highs. So that's my thoughts on the Canadian dollar right now. So if we do kind of trade up a bit, then we could see a drop down into Tuesday. And don't look at the dates here, I know, but we're on a daily chart. So Tuesday, and then potentially see that as the objective for the week if we have a bullish week. In terms of news, we have some pound dollar news Monday morning, Australian in the evening. We have pound dollar news on Tuesday mornings. This could be a pretty good London session. Some NZD, right? USD, we got CPI on Wednesday. So if we do trade higher on USD CAD, then we could see a CPI trade up into this and then, or sorry, trade down into this and then drive higher, which means if this is going higher, then we'll probably see foreigns going lower. And that small drop there would probably induce foreigns to go higher again and then consider a drop down. That's just my opinion, right? We don't really have a crazy amount of news, but Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are the more loaded days for the US, and we got some foreign news earlier in the week. So this is my opinion on USD CAD. Yeah, we have a potential to maybe drop down into this, fill this a little bit. We have a potential balanced price range right there, order block on a 4-hour chart, and yeah, and then run highs. So we'll see how it looks, we'll see how it trades and, you know, goes. But in my eyes, I think that this could be a potential bullish fractal here for the USD CAD. So NQ, obviously right now we have some SMT with ES. We'll get into this one after. We'll start NQ first. So I guess like a main thing right now is we got some SMT here. Weekly chart, let's drop out to the weekly chart. weekly chart. So I guess like 2 weeks ago, we can call it, not last week, but the last weekly candle. So drop down into this weekly fair value gap here, rejected or respected it well, right? Traded cleanly off. Now, previous week we had 4th of July, we had NFP, like just a lot of interesting price action. So nothing too crazy, right? Take the previous week high and just retrace into this weekly candle. I mean, we have this fair value gap here, which I believe has not been traded to yet. Nope, it has not. About 5-point difference here. So this weekly fair value gap and volume imbalance could act as, I guess, a potential draw on liquidity. We've been trading high for a while now, right? Like this has been a pretty bullish year in terms of index futures. As you can see, just continuously driving higher out of a consolidation, right? So if you look at like NQ1, you can see consolidation, expansion, retracement, expansion, and we're nearing these equal highs. I mean, this high has been taken over here, not by a lot, but it has been taken. We have this potential body here acting as a, let's say, rejection block, potentially. Hasn't, I'm not too convinced that this is the high all time, or this is the high at least of the year. I was bearish earlier on in the year and, you know, around these levels here, but didn't act on it. So that's the benefit of understanding ICT, is obviously you need confirmation for everything. Now this is where it gets interesting. This is a potential balance price range here, and you can see that this fair value gap, if we invert it, we have been respecting. We have been respecting it. If we threw this into, like, let's say quadrants here, let's say we just made this quadrants relative bullish, right? So you can see we traded down this week. The low of the week was into that quarter of that fair value gap, just by chance, I guess you could call it. So I think having this up on your charts is probably important. If we do want to trade higher, how do we respect this inversion fair value gap? You can have the quadrants on it if you want. If we do trade higher, right, on a monthly standpoint, this monthly fair value gap could probably get filled. 2-week standpoint, it's not a lot above here. We got this high, but that's pretty much it. But unfortunately, with the actual futures contract, we can't see that data. So you kind of have to just bring over the prices of this, right? So here we're looking at 15,190 and a quarter. So we can mark that out. Whatever from over here. And 14,913.5. 14,913.5. Okay, so that's our weekly inversion fair value gap. We can just bring that, whatever, just here for now is fine. Just leave it. So we'll see how we respect that. If we start driving below it, then I would assume we're probably going to attack this weekly fair value gap here that's open, right? Daily chart. So I'll transcribe these levels to my chart at a later time. I want to have it looking clean. So this is a potential draw on liquidity. If we hold daily chart, there's a order block here on the daily right here, as you can see. bullish order block. I'll mark it in blue. Mean threshold is this dashed line. We do have some internal liquidity here that could be used to pair into the order block for more buying. We have this bullish fair value gap here, which we've closed through now. So that means that we could use this as an inversion, fair value gap to go lower, maybe into here. So that's where my eyes would be. In terms of the 4 hour, we have this bearish fair value gap, which we've respected the gap itself. Consequent encroachment has been traded through, but looking pretty good in terms of driving down into some lower prices, right? Into some more open liquidity here. And we'd have to see how it trades when it goes down into here. But I do like bearish prices right now in terms of the index futures, right? We've kind of, this is just a pretty prominent fractal of price going lower in my eyes. This hourly fair value gap has been pretty nice in terms of respect at consequent encroachment, so that might provide for, you know, retracement earlier in the week, and this might be our objective, or we trade up into that and we could see one of those weekly profiles where it's here, right, maybe like whatever here, and then it closes off. Kind of a reversal profile, creating this would basically create like your doji candle essentially, right? Especially if this was higher, then this would kind of create a doji candle, which is not what I trade with. But you go in, trade down, that's a potential scenario, right? This could be a potential hourly order block here. Mark it out. Put H1 OB minus, right? And you can see because it's driving up into that 4 hour fair value gap here. So it's repricing to a higher time frame inefficiency. This hourly fair value gap is probably some sort of, you know, order block within it nested. So we could see an immediate jump depending on where we open today on Sunday. But if we open on Sunday and we decide to trade higher, then my eyes would be on this hourly order block to potentially take us lower, right? I think that these highs are more protected right now. We have some more open lows over here that I'm interested in to ultimately get down into this liquidity pool here. And then at that point, we could determine that if we do want to go higher from here, then we could treat this as a daily order block and potentially see, you know, these highs ran up here. And S&P will obviously be a big factor in this as well in terms of how are we responding with, you know, correlated markets. So, you know, ES, right? Is ES responding in a more bullish fashion, or is ES showing weakness while NQ is showing strength? So definitely important. If we look at just a quick thing in terms of their programs here, right? The institutional hedging, let's say the commercial hedging programs were sell pretty much on every front. It's bearish. They're in a short program. On NQ, open interest, we had a pretty strong rise in open interest up until here, and now we've seen relatively sharp decline. So we could see a consolidation. Consolidation is not out of the books, especially due to time of year, right? It is July. It is the summer month. Summer months generally are like the doldrums. It's kind of quiet, and we've seen like kind of that second half into June and beginning of July. We've just been kind of chill. All right, June itself was a pretty big month in terms of, actually not really, but we've just been really bullish, strong bullish sentiment on the index futures. So overall, again, hourly order block, potential balanced price range, right? 4 hour, right? You see that 4 hour fair value gap there. Hourly order block, potential balanced price range, and we could see that daily order block. Now, what happens if we just continue higher from here? Then you reevaluate the narrative and you act accordingly, right? Nothing's guaranteed. When I do these weekly forecasts, I'm not holding myself to this specific bias or this specific, I guess, narrative that's in price. This is what I'm seeing now while the markets aren't moving, but it is dynamic in terms of if I do see things during the week that change my mind or change my narrative or my bias, then I'll change. And this isn't a test. You're not getting graded, so you can change whenever you want. It's about being profitable. It's about being on the right side. And if you do hold your bias, if you do marry your bias, sometimes that can hurt you. So as long as you're objective and what you're seeing in price is actually there and it makes sense with how they are reacting to each other and how each thing is, its own variable, and if that variable, like let's say, for example, this as an order block, right? That's a qualified order block. It's taken liquidity. It's closed above liquidity. It's closed into this hourly or 4 hour fair value gap. This is valid. So if we do see respect off this, then I could expect lower prices, right? Lower prices into here makes sense. Why? Because these lows are not protected, right? Mainly this low here, which if this low gets taken, I think all these lows get taken, right? And that's also a London low that hasn't been taken as well. You have a fair value gap in there on the hourly chart within a daily order block. And you see here, 8 a.m. low, 10 a.m. low. This could also be taken as well at some point. I'm not going to completely say that's not possible. So if we do go lower, I'm fine with that. My next objective would most likely be this fair value gap due to the equal lows down here. It's pretty deep retracement, but I don't see it being impossible, especially in today's conditions. ES, S&P 500, whatever you want to call it. We're on a weekly chart right now. We extend out to a monthly chart. We have a plethora of data compared to NASDAQ. But anyways, so let's start looking here. 2-week chart. What do we notice right away? We got a gap, right? Very prominent gap. Pure gap in price. There's a very strong draw on liquidity in my eyes. Very, very strong draw on liquidity. So this gap is really important. We're going to make sure that that is marked accordingly. Or I guess I could put 2 week, whatever. Weekly gap on the right. It's very, very important, and it's almost guaranteed to get traded to. I'm not gonna say it's guaranteed, but it's very likely that price will come up into here. So ES with that whole six sister model right now, with it being behind NQ. NQ was a stronger pair for a while. Now ES is looking like the stronger pair. You kind of have to treat it in that way. So I think maybe if we are bullish this week or the next, let's say, month, like over this July, NQ above these highs is probably cleaner, right? Lower resistance. ES above these highs might be a little bit more resistance. We'll see. But we have a down close candle here on the weekly chart, which is a potential order block. I'm not going to say it's the order block. Oh my God. It's a potential order block. It's a potential order block. Right? Traded down into it Thursday last week. Projected pretty cleanly off of that mean threshold. So I like that personally. I like that we've rejected off mean threshold. If we do go lower, I'm perfectly fine with it. We'll have to see how it looks. But other than that, other than this down close candle on the weekly chart, we do have this open fair value gap here with, I guess, what would you call it, like a nested volume imbalance. We have this fair value gap as well here. So those are kind of the two discount levels that I would be looking at if we do fail this order block here on the weekly. Daily chart might give us some more clarity just because there isn't really a lot that's close on the weekly right now. We have this here. We have this being a volume imbalance. Oh, shit. Fuck, bro. Okay. We have this acting as a volume imbalance here, right? So we have a gap inside of a volume imbalance. So again, could we just trade up into that and then go lower potentially? But we haven't yet. We haven't gone into this volume imbalance just yet. So it's close. So we'll mark that out as well. Put a nice 3-pointer on that one. Week 1 VI minus. Throw it on. Make it pink so it stands out, nice and vibrant. I like my volume imbalances to be like lime green and pink. Daily chart. So in terms of the daily chart, we, just as like we did on NQ, we failed this. Wow, this is probably not a good spot to have my tool. We failed this fair value gap here. And we could be looking for lower prices. Now, again, this is a potential daily order block. Smaller body, so I'd probably use the wick in my opinion, right? We also used it to trade into this weekly fair value gap here. So you see that. So I like this being the potential order block. You can see the respect of it there. Very clean. Didn't even trade to the mean threshold of that wick and just drive up higher. We have this volume imbalance here from Wednesday to Thursday's trading. So that's also an area of interest for me. So right now, this weekly fair value gap, I'm going to remove it. This daily order block, I'll keep it here. And I'm going to add this volume imbalance here. And you see we've traded into it. Have we filled it? Not completely. It's fine. But we have traded into it. So in my eyes, I think that with seeing the confluence with ES and NQ, I think that there is some bullish upside here that we could see. If we continue to drive lower, then I think that these weekly imbalances here are going to be our targets. I do favor the upside though, if I'm being honest. I think like in terms of the weekly expansion, you know, we're respecting this daily fair value gap here. This is kind of our, let's say, quote unquote, not respected fair value gap, but we don't really have a balanced price range. You could consider this to be an implied fair value gap bearishly. At that point, you would have a balanced price range. So if we do drive lower, we want to see how we react at this bullish order block here, right? How are we respecting that? And if we are respecting that, then my target's going to be this blue shaded box up here, which is the weekly gap. I'll move this, oh wow. I'll move this over till the end of this week here. Roughly there. Say around there, that's pretty visible. So yeah, weekly gap, probably going to be the monthly objective in my opinion. Doesn't have to be, but I think it's likely. I don't think we'll hit it this week unless we're pretty animated later on in the week and we're already extending closer. Yeah, so I'm going to treat this as an order block traded into. If we do retrade to it, perfectly fine with that. On an hourly chart, we've kind of came up I'm gonna remove this. Came up, we got some SMT with NQ right there, as you'll see here now. NQ took this high, did not take this high, but it took this swing high right there, right? So I like ES in terms of reaching that objective here. So I'm probably going to be focusing more of my trading on ES to get long, just because I think that it has unfinished business to the upside, while NQ, right? NQ, first of all, we can't see it, but if we go to NQM 2023, you can see that we've already finished most of our business up here in terms of, you know, gaps. A lot of gaps up in there, right? NQH 2023, you can see we had even more data up here. There is a smaller gap up at 15,493. So that was on, again, the January, or not the January, I guess like the March contract, but we had that gap up there, up into 15,371. You can see where we are right now. Came up into 15,495. So NQH 2023, we've already repriced to this. So this fair value gap could be the last part, or last, I guess, piece, but see how we respect those levels. Now, this is where, and this is NQ, so I won't really do much on that, but ES and NQ definitely got some downside objectives I think that we're going to hit later on. Do we want to run this high, all-time high? Not really needed. I don't know. Maybe. A lot of shorts here. A lot of institutional shorts here. Confirmed by 13F filings in many directions. Many companies are short on indexes, and they're just wondering, like, oh, fuck. Like, I mean, the fundamentals say that the stock should be short right now. Economic conditions, like, we should be short. It should be in a crash, but it hasn't happened. And I think that a lot of that talk has kind of gone away now since we've been driving higher. So I think at this point, if people are either starting to lose the sentiment of bearishness that they had in here and potentially start to regain bullishness, that's where we could start to see people buying at a premium and price coming back down to a discount. And maybe we don't crash ever, but I kind of like the odds of going lower. So that's my opinion on that. In terms of this week, I think ES, if it does want to seek discounts, it's probably going to go back into this daily fair value gap or daily order block here and maybe run some internal liquidity, right? This could act as internal liquidity there. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, this could act as internal liquidity there. And further, I think that we obviously want this weekly gap. So this week we might just run previous week high. If we get animated, weekly gap, but we'll have to see. I like this daily order block. Like this 4-hour breaker here. This breaker is nice. And yeah, I think that overall we're still bullish on ES, and if we're bullish on ES, NQ is going to be bullish too. It may not be as fast or as clean, so I'm electing to focus more attention on ES long if we do get confirmation than NQ. NQ is good intraday, but I think that ES is going to start to have more cleaner price action. So yeah, that's the weekly forecast for this week. Long one. Definitely in a position right now, or definitely in a market situation right now where being nimble is definitely a position. It's definitely a position. Don't be greedy. Don't be looking for the, 100-to-1 trades or whatever. Come in, take your piece, and get out. come in, take your piece, get out. That's the consistent part of this, and especially with conditions on the higher time frame being a little bit iffy. Like my two higher probability plays right now with draw and liquidity would be, I like ES up here, and to be honest, I like USD CAD up here. So those are my two, let's say, higher probability picks for the week. And yeah, we'll see where we go. Thanks so much for watching.